Hi, this is Helen from Hypnotherapy Business Excellence, and I'd like to welcome William Mitchell to our program tonight.
And I'd always done a lot of speaking outside the church on psychological topics, and particularly things like grief recovery, things that kind of went with the ministry, you know. And I was literally flying back from a talk in New Jersey back to Texas, and back in the 90s, you look in the back of USA Today magazine, and newspaper, and they'd have a help wanted section. It said it was looking for professional speakers, and I thought, well, and I'm sort of a professional speaker. I certainly speak every Sunday, and I did a lot of speaking outside the church, and so I at an 800 number, I answered the call, and when I talked to them, they said, oh, we do weight loss seminars and we use hypnosis, and I thought, oh, hypnosis. So anyway, make a long story short, they told me about the seminar. They sent me a video of the seminar, and it was a very good seminar as far as the physiology of weight loss. And so then basically I had to decide about hypnosis. So actually I had several psychologists in my church, so I called one of the clinical psychologists, and we went to breakfast, and I asked him, I said, what do you think about hypnosis? And he said, well, hypnosis is great. He says, I use hypnosis all the time in my practice. It's not a cure-all, but don't be afraid of hypnosis. So very quickly they hired me, and so they sent a gentleman out to train me who actually was, it turned out he was the head of the company, and so I followed him around. He was doing these big group seminars in hotels where you have a Holiday Inn and 100 people show up, and he hypnotized the whole group at one time. So after just a few days of working with him, he said, I think you're ready. And I was used to traditional education, and I thought, well, you had to be licensed or at least certified. And so I asked him, I said, don't I have to be licensed or certified? And he looked at me and made the sign of the cross, said, you are certified. That's a true story.
That's too funny. I love it.
So then he sent me out to do my first seminar, and I'll never forget, they gave you a script to read and for the hypnosis part, and I was in Laredo, Texas. You could literally look out the window of the hotel and see Mexico, and 60 brave souls came in that night, and I did my talk, and then it came time for the hypnosis, so I dim the lights, and I get my little pen light out, and I've got the script, and I start reading the script, and about 5 minutes, maybe 10 into the script, I look up, and these people in the audience were like, I mean, gone. They were arms hanging down the floor. I mean, they were deeply, deeply hypnotized. So I'm going, good script.
Excellent script.
Good script. So the way they worked was they would send you I was in the Midwestern part of the United States. You'd go to these towns and you'd do the seminar, and then they'd send you to the next town, and then you'd make the same run again 3 months later, about once a quarter. So I made my first run, then we started the second run, and I'd go back, and these people would come back who had lost a bunch of weight in just a few months from the one-time seminar. So I went, well, this is pretty powerful stuff. And I began seeing a lot of what I now know is called hypnotic phenomenon in the seminars. People were really having strong reactions. Now, in fairness, it was a good script, but there were 5 other people working for the same company, and every week we had a conference call, and they were not getting near the results. Wow. They weren't getting anywhere close to the hypnotic phenomenon. As a matter of fact, they kept saying, did you change the script, or what are you doing? And even the owner of the company. But as my friend who was just here that you met, David Nash, who's also a minister, we went to college together, a lot of the skills in ministry easily transfer over into hypnotherapy. And so I think when I did those seminars, a lot of those skills from the ministry kind of transferred, and people trusted me, and they were more conducive. And so I then started on a mission to get more training. So I've taken lots of training. Like you, I've worked with Dr. Michael Yapko. I've had 3 of his one-week trainings, and I've studied a lot with Dr. John Edgett, who's a clinical psychologist here in the States, and then I've taken the National Guild of Hypnotists courses, and I've taken a number of, anywhere I can get some more learning. And then since 2003, I stopped doing the group seminars, and I had started a clinic in Springfield, Illinois, and pretty much have been there ever since. And we've had lots and lots of good experiences there, and seen lots and lots of clients. And kind of like you, the first year I did the clinic, I far exceeded my financial goals. I'd say get out and do as much hypnosis as you can, and don't do it for free. If you've been trained, then you've paid for that training, and you deserve to be compensated. And to be honest with you, I made a 6-figure income for a long time, and basically didn't know much more than how to read a script. So
it's fantastic to know that, isn't it? It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, so I was supposed to give a presentation at this conference entitled it's kind of a joke off of the Saturday Night Live skit where they said baseball been very, very good to me. I was going to do one, hypnosis has been very, very good to me. But,
Really?
but I went ahead and canceled it because we had to do some rearranging with one of the presenters canceled at the last minute. So we went ahead and dropped that one. I'll probably do it next year. But one thing I talk about, and not everyone is suited to this. Some people should just do one thing and do it really well. But what has kept me going over the years is I have multiple streams of income in the hypnosis field.
Okay, so can you just tell me about those multiple streams?
Well, of course, the clinic has always been the largest.
So that's one, the clinic.
The clinic.
One-on-one work.
Yes, one-on-one work.
And then we've got stage hypnosis.
Stage hypnosis, which keeps growing, and that's gotten bigger and bigger. And then trainings. I do trainings like this week. We had the certification class that you spoke to, and just give you an idea. If you took what the 5 people paid me to be in that class, it comes to about almost $12,000. So that's not bad for a week's work.
Yeah, that's great.
So, and I do several a year, and then of course the Heartland Hypnosis Conference, to be honest with you, will turn a profit. It won't be a huge amount of money, but it will turn a profit. So so all those are streams of income with hypnosis. Plus, I'm doing like yourself. I'm just getting more and more into doing online sessions.
So how do you deal with clients who are eating because of emotional issues? They really have some sort of emotional issue that's holding them back from the choices that they need to make.
Right. Well, and here in the United States, we have an epidemic on weight. There's an obesity epidemic. And
not very dissimilar to Australia.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Well, so I usually start with the premise, unless they reveal otherwise in the intake interview. I start with the premise that they probably, need to eat less and exercise more, and we start with that premise. And then as I get to know them better, then we get into, are they perfectionists? That can be an emotional issue. Then we get into, is there something else going on in their background? And I will do occasionally, I will do an age regression if it's called for. Now, I don't do age regressions with everyone because most of the people coming to see me, they really think they know what they need, and most of the time they do. They have bad habits and they need to change those habits. And so we do a lot of habit control, changing habits. But there are people who do have emotional issues around weight, and when we meet up with those people, obviously we spend more time, on that kind of thing. So, but I've had some real interesting age regressions, where people have had terrible things happen as they were children or whatever, and this one terrible story was this one woman was dropped off at her relative's house by her mother and never saw her mother again, and literally in the age regression she's screaming at the top of her lungs, don't leave me, don't leave me. But sadly, the people who did raise her, who were distant relatives of hers, sadly, they didn't really understand the best way to kind of nurture her, and so all of her upbringing, they kept saying, you don't want to grow up and be a whore like your mother. And so whenever she would start becoming attractive to men, that would all kick in about being a whore like her mother, and so she'd gain the weight. So after we did that age regression and then did the kind of debriefing you do, she did very well and lost about 60 pounds and looked really good. And she was happily married. I mean, she was a married person, but she several times just started losing weight. And even though she was married, she was very uncomfortable with the male attention. And so that was an extreme case, but it was a case where sometimes the emotional issues come up. But luckily in her case, it just really took one age regression, and then we could focus on the weight loss.
Perfect. Someone told me that you were the #1 therapist for weight loss in this district.
I don't think there's any doubt about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so tell me about what you do for emotional eating.
Well, I don't usually see people just one session. I'm not a big believer in the one and done approach to weight loss. I see people over a period of time, several sessions, and we keep working on their issues. And now sometimes, especially perfectionists, sometimes that first session goes so well that for weeks they're just they're on a high and they're losing weight and they're doing great.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But sooner or later there's going to come that moment. Yeah. And so then part of my job is a little coaching, to kind of explain to them, you're doing fine. We just got to get through this patch, and but the real emotional eaters, I use a lot of hypnotic phenomenon as a way to break the pattern or the habit. It's an intervention, and I use a lot of amnesia techniques. Like, for example, I had one woman come and she had gained 10 pounds every year for 10 years, so now she's 100 pounds overweight, and so her husband's not happy about it. So every night she would wait for him to fall asleep, and then she'd slide out of bed, go downstairs, not to the kitchen, but to hide the food from her husband, she'd put the food in the trunk of her car.
Yeah.
And she'd eat out of the trunk. So in her case, I gave her a post-hypnotic suggestion for amnesia, and the way you get any post-hypnotic suggestion to really work well, you have to have a physical trigger. So the trigger I gave her was she'd take her thumb or her finger and reach out and push the plate just a little forward after her evening meal, and then she'd have total amnesia about food all night. And then in the morning,
She forgot about it.
forgot about food.
She completely forgot that she had to eat.
Completely forgot about food. About food. She didn't have to.
How wonderful.
Yeah, she didn't have to eat at night. And then the second part of that is in the morning when she'd open her eyes, she'd remember to eat breakfast. See? So she'd have her 3 meals a day. That was not her problem. A lot of people that are overweight are not eating big meals. They really aren't.
No.
They're eating after the meals or in between the meals or other times.
They're grazing all through the day.
Yeah. I think at night she was consuming a pretty significant amount of food. But, you know, that kind of guilty eating, you know. And, but a year later, I was interviewing her. She lost 103 pounds. And I was interviewing her and several other people for a weight loss seminar recording I was making for my students. And when I got to her, I said, now you do this at night, right? And she went, yes, and changed subject. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I thought, I'll ask her again in the interview a little later, you know. So I asked her again, you do this at night, right? And she went, yes, change subject. And then I went, dummy, I should know this. She wants to keep it unconscious.
Yeah. She doesn't want to be mindful about it.
The whole suggestion was wrapped in amnesia, see? So she's not really even conscious she does it.
Yeah.
She just does it. Now, by contrast, I had a gentleman here in St. Louis. He lost a lot of weight too, but has a lot of stress in his life. He owns a big company and a lot of debt, you know, with the company and all that. And he told me at the end of the year, he says, the hypnosis is still working great. You know, he says, I haven't had cheeseburgers since the first session. You know, I do a lot of reversion techniques too.
Yeah, yeah.
But he said, but he had become conscious of this technique I used with her, and he says, this works every time. He says, if I push that plate like that, I don't eat at night. He says, but sometimes I don't push the plate.
He chooses, I'm not pushing that plate.
That's right. He's going, tonight I'm going to snack. You know?
Yeah.
So, but his nighttime eating was nothing as severe as hers. You know?
Yes.
So, but I do a lot of interventions with different hypnotic phenomena. I do the food aversion. Probably in the United States, I'm probably the best known with weight loss about the food aversions.
Oh my God, I have to ask this question. So with food aversion, what's the aversion?
Well, as you probably know, there's been a lot of psychological research done on food aversions that's actually just clinical psychological work. Garcia in the United States is the big name. If you look it up, put him on Google. And food aversions are very well studied, and we know a lot about food aversions. The advantage of hypnosis over a traditional food aversion is a traditional food aversion, you eat something, you get sick, and you have projectile vomiting, it's really a mess, but the person doesn't want to eat the food again.
Yeah.
Right? In hypnosis, you can skip the physical part where they get sick and have to throw the food up. You can just make them think they're sick. So what I ask people is, I say, you know, what are the high-calorie foods that if you cut them out would help you lose weight rapidly, kind of as a jump start to your weight loss program? So they'll pick like soda pop or chocolate or, you know, fried chicken or something really high calorie. Because I tell them, don't put on something that's not a big deal. Just we want something that's going to give you a jump start. Because food aversion by themselves are not enough to lose weight. Yeah. You've got to have that as part of a total program. But it is a jump start. So then, and I tell them ahead of time, this is what we're going to do. So they give consent. You know, I'm going to tell them I'm going to turn the food into something really disgusting, and they get to choose. I give them 3 choices. Yeah. Either it has to turn into vomit, human droppings, or the food covered with live maggots. And so they just, you know, they all cringe, and I kind of know which one will work. And so then we do that in the session, and their faces will, you know, crunch.
I can't decide. I can't decide out of the 3 which
well,
is
sometimes you can combine them. What I do is I create a garbage can, and I'll have them look in the garbage, and the food's in the garbage, and then they'll see the maggots and flies, and then they see that somebody vomited in the garbage can just before they arrived, and it smells. And so, you know, you can combine them if you want to.
Yeah.
But the main people that need that are the emergency room nurses. It's pretty hard to gross them out.
Yeah, of course.
They've seen it all.
Yeah.
But it works very well, and you know, matter of fact, just this week, a lady works next door in the little deli over there. Our student's reading over there, and she was quite overweight, and they said, would you like to come over and get hypnotized? And so they brought her over, the student hypnotized her, and then I just had him read a script that I prepared about aversion. And when they went back the next day, she hadn't had any of these. Her big foods were French fries and potato chips, and she has some sort of strange, I've done a lot of weight loss, I've never run into this before. She will eat potato chips until she gets some sort of strange, over-satiated, sickening high.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she goes to sleep.
Okay. Okay.
She eats
That's
till
a
her
lot of potato
she eats till her blood sugar levels get so high it basically almost knocks her out. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so in her case, I do think there's a lot of emotional underneath that though,
Yeah.
because she has a husband that was deceased just a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's when that started.
Yeah.
So really, her long-term work, as you know, needs to be the grief work and dealing with the loss of the husband.
Of course.
But right now, she's eating herself sick.
So with aversions, William, what about alcohol? I don't know about you, but in Australia, the clients that I have, especially with professional women,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol is a massive issue. So
Yes,
they
nighttime.
come home from work at night,
Yes.
every night, and they need to drink their wine.
Yes, that's it.
And it becomes a really bad habit that becomes out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do for that?
Well, usually, and I've had that a lot too. I think that is a common issue with professional people.
Yeah.
It's kind of a way to wind down, you know, at night.
Yeah.
And so we have to negotiate there. And the negotiation is, you can do an aversion with that kind of thing, and it can work. But often with them, I will negotiate often. Instead of, 3 or 4 glasses of wine a night, 1. And 1 isn't so terrible. I mean, there's calories there, but that's not so terrible.
Yeah.
It's the excess after 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the time we can get them down to 1, and that seems to work quite well.
Well, what about an aversion? What would you do for an aversion for alcohol?
Well, obviously the one that jumps out is vomit,
Yeah.
because it's liquid.
Okay. All right. So you would use that.
Yeah, so like, in the aversion, they literally can be about to drink the liquid, and then just before it goes in their mouth, it turns into vomit.
Okay.
And then they really gag, so it's going in their throat, their mouth.
Yeah.
And if I really want them to go extreme aversion, I'll make them swallow it.
Okay.
Yeah, but most people don't need that. Most people don't need that. That's the extreme ones.
Okay.
Most people, just the thought of it is like enough to almost have the effect. So, but what we do is we tie off the aversion. This is very important. So that the aversion does not end by saying whenever you see that food or whenever because that would be cruel, because other people around them might want wine or they might want chocolate.
Yeah.
So the way we tie it off at the end is that the person has zero desire for that food. All desire has been destroyed. All desire is gone. So their family members can eat those foods. Other people they socialize with can eat those foods, and that's not an issue. They just have zero desire for that food. And that's the way we tie it off. So how you tie off this post-hypnotic suggestion is very important. I'll tell you, I was a National Guild of Hypnotists in 2007.
Yeah.
I gave this talk, and what happens when I give these talks about, especially weight loss, all these hypnotists come up when I get hypnotized.
Yeah.
And so I charge
they
them. I charge them at the conference. Well, this one nurse had lost 30, but she had more weight to go, and she plateaued for a while. And so she asked if I would work with her, so I did. And it was on Sunday, and then Sunday night the conference ended. And so I'd been invited to go to dinner with a group of people. So I met them down in the hotel lobby. And I did not know she was going to be in the group. She was. So I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. So we go to this big Chinese restaurant. Well, one of the other interventions I'll use a post-hypnotic suggestion like, whenever you go to a restaurant, as soon as they serve the food to you, before you take a single bite, you'll take your knife and your fork, you divide your food in half. Well, out comes the food, and it's a Chinese restaurant. We're sitting at a circular table. She had ordered soup. So like Moses, she had her knife and her fork trying to part the waters. And she does this for like 30 seconds, and I'm doing everything I can not to laugh like you're laughing.
That's too
I'm like
funny.
holding my hand on my mouth. And finally she looks up, and I'm across the table, and she sees me, and she goes, "You did this to me!" And I said, "Well, it works good with solid food." So now I've changed the suggestion to solid food.
Solid food.
Solid
Very
food.
solid food.
But I did see her the following year, and she had lost the 30 that she wanted
Wow.
to lose. So I really appreciate you being here. That's the last thing I'd like to say.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you,
my pleasure.
William.
God-
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Absolutely.